Good evening and welcome. This is Primetime News on TV1. Today is the 24th of December 2020. It's Christmas Eve and Christmas Day is just around the corner. Bringing you the news, I'm Jamal Ratnaik for the Newsfirst team. Here are your headlines for tonight.
8,600 inmates released on bail to ease congestion at prisons. More waste containers sent from Ukraine, imported by 8 consignees, seized by Sri Lankan authorities. Can the agreements reached regarding the East Container Terminal be reversed?
ඒක අහවලා ගහපු ගිවිසුම අහවලා එකඟ වෙලා තිබ්බයි කියලා හිතලා ඒක මේ ආණ්ඩුව කාලේ ක්‍රියාත්මක කරනවා නම් ඒක මොන යම් ආකාරයකින්වත් සාධාරණීකරණය කරන්න බෑ.
India takes up the responsibility of developing the Lanka harbour. Sri Lanka rupee depreciates to nearly 195 against the US dollar. Allegations made over the exponential rise in the price of essential goods.
අත්‍යවශ්‍ය බාණ්ඩ මිල පාලනය කරගන්න අද ආණ්ඩුව අසමත් වෙලා තියෙනවා.
මට බොහොම අවංකවත් හෘදයාංගමවත් මේ රටේ ජනතාවට කියන්න තිබෙන්නේ අපේ රට ලංකා ඉතිහාසයේ නොවිරු දැවැන්ත අර්බුදයකට මුහුණ දීලා තියෙන්නේ කොවිඩ්-19 වසංගතය.
Today is Christmas Eve.
Main sponsor.
බන්ධනාගාරය තුල වෙඩි 4ක් වැදිලා මිය ගියා කියලා ඊයේ මට IDH වලින් කිව්වා මගේ මහත්තයාට එතෙන්ට වෙඩි වැදිලා ලේ බෑලා ජීවිතක්ෂයට පත් වෙලා කියලා කිව්වා මම නුදුනුවත් මං ඒ කොලේට අසං කරේ මට මගේ මහත්තයව මගේ දරු දෙන්නට පෙන්නන්න ඕනේ මගේ දරු දෙන්න බලාගෙන ඉන්නවා මට බලන්න ඕන මහත්තයා මට ගෙදරට අරගන්න ඕන කියලායි මං ඉල්ලා හිටින්නේ මගේ මහත්තයා වෙනුවෙන් සාධාරණයක් ඉටු කරන්න මගේ මහත්තයා මැරෙන්න හිටියේ නෑ මගේ මහත්තයා මැරෙන්න හිටියේ නෑ අපිටයි දරු දෙන්නටයි කවුරුත් නෑ.
Those were the lamentations of an aggrieved wife opposite the Mahara prison complex earlier today. It was only 23 days after the Mahara prison riot did she discover that her beloved husband had been killed during the incident. Meanwhile, family members of the inmates who were killed during the Mahara prison riot had organized a media briefing today.
Please ensure that justice is served for the sake of my child. He was the only child I had. We tried to discipline him. He has died in vain after being shot. My eldest son lost his life. I wasn't notified until recently. The authorities said a brawl had broken out because they had consumed a pill. The authorities asked us to go away. I got to know recently that my son was dead. Please punish those responsible. Do not let such crimes occur in the future. They could have shot their hand or leg. We would have accepted the cripple. I value my husband. The person who is responsible should be punished. Our only request from the government is to ensure that such incidents do not happen in the future. Do not render us helpless this way.
11 inmates lost their lives during the Mahara prison riot, which occurred on the 29th of November. It has been confirmed by now that 8 of the inmates had died after being shot at. However, prior to the scientific confirmation on the cause of death, officials claimed the deaths had occurred following a brawl which broke out between employees.
Various interpretations were given when these deaths occurred. Even the subject minister said it was a brawl between the inmates. He said it in Parliament. The video released by them does not show anyone being shot at. Even when the case was taken up in court yesterday, the Attorney General's representative questioned on what ground the aggrieved party had filed the case. This leads us to believe whether they are attempting to conceal the details, even in courts.
The Committee to Protect Prisoners' Rights also alleges holding prisoners within the prison who are eyewitnesses of the incident will affect the accuracy of evidence provided.
They are not letting those inmates out because they are eyewitnesses. The government is attempting to file cases against the inmates for causing property damage. This is suppression. The eyewitnesses are under the custody of the murderers. When that is the case, can they provide evidence against these murderers? The subject minister made a statement in parliament saying that no one died of gunshot wounds. The footage released did not include any footage of shots being fired either. They attempted to conceal evidence and sweep the issue under the carpet. Their only request was to release them because they had already been granted bail. The other request was for PCR tests to be conducted. The other was not to bring COVID-19 infected patients to the prison. The last one was to provide them with palatable food. Those are the reasons they gave in rioting. Those were the people who were shot at. It was an inhumane, undemocratic act.
It has been confirmed that 8 inmates of the Mahara prison died after being shot at. However, the minister and other prison officials said they only fired warning shots at the sky. They also said shots were fired below the knees of the inmates. It was said in parliament as well. What has happened now?
The police and the magistrate should provide the final interpretation on this incident. It is a matter that should be handled by the judiciary.
The subject minister has released a video of the riots. They led the people to believe that the deaths occurred due to a brawl among the prisoners. However, the post-mortems have revealed otherwise.
I cannot comment on it since investigations have not concluded yet.
Meanwhile, the Department of Prisons said more than 8,000 inmates have been released on bail to reduce congestion at prisons. The COVID-19 situation has caused inconvenience to the inmates, which ultimately leads to unrest within the prison premises. Following discussions between the subject minister, Minister of Justice and the Attorney General's Department, a decision was reached to release 8,600 prison inmates on bail. In other words, we have reduced congestion in prisons. Overcrowding at prisons will lead to further unrest. A mechanism to manage such situations are currently being discussed.
Several areas were isolated today due to the COVID-19 situation in the country.
The National Operations Centre for the Prevention of COVID-19 Outbreaks said Avisavella, Kosgama and Ruwanwella police jurisdictions were isolated today with immediate effect until further notice. The Abeyapura Grama Niladhari Division and Jinnah Nagar area in Trincomalee were put under isolation with effect at 6 a.m. today. Meanwhile, the Laksana 7 housing complex in Vallampitiya was released from isolation at 6 this morning. The housing complex was isolated on the 30th of last month.
While global attention has been drawn towards the vaccines developed to counter COVID-19, local attention has been mainly focused on the indigenous tonic developed by Dhammika Bandara. The Department of Ayurveda, which conducted research into this tonic, provided Dhammika Bandara written permission to establish an Ayurvedic dispensary. We have provided the license to produce the tonic. He can produce the tonic now. It will not be considered an anti-COVID-19 tonic. Clinical trials are being conducted in that regard by the committee appointed by the Ministry of Health. Based on the results of the committee, we can decide whether it has been classified an anti-COVID tonic or not. It has been approved by now as a herbal tonic. However, the written permission granted to Dhammika Bandara to establish an Ayurvedic pharmacy was rejected by him.
මම අර පරීක්ෂණයට කියනවා මේ පරීක්ෂණයට මෙච්චර බෝතල් දියන් කියනවා. අරකට බෝතල් දියන් මේකට බෝතල් දියන් කියලා පරීක්ෂණ හැම එකකටම ගෙනින් දීලා. දැන් මට මේකක් දෙන්න මොකටද මේ? ඒ මිනිස්සු බීවි මොනවද එතකොට? අද බීලා බය නැතුව ඉන්නේ මොකටද? එන එදාම කියලා තිබුණානේ කොරෝනා වලට මේක හරියන්නේ නැහැ කියලා. මේක නම දාන්න කැමති නැහැ. මේක ධම්මිකගේ ඒව නැත්තම් වඩු වාස්කේක කොහොමද තමයි මේ ගහන්න නැත්තේ අපේ ආරංචි. වාස්කේක කියලා. මට අපේ ආරංචි මේකේ මල්ල ඕනේ නැහැ.
State Minister of Indigenous Medicine Sisira Jayakodi engaged in an inspection tour at the Ayurvedic Hospital in Kappalture, Trincomalee. The State Minister also inquired into medicine produced by the doctors of the hospital in a bid to counter COVID-19. When there are more than 30 anti-COVID-19 medicines in existence, it is inapt to focus on just one. There are more indigenous medicines in the trial stages. Once they succeed, we will issue the result. Journalists also questioned the State Minister on the decision to grant Dhammika Bandara permission to establish an Ayurvedic pharmacy. As far as we know, such a certificate has not been issued to him. If it does happen, the Commissioner will hand it over personally. This is a dilemma for us as well.
ඉතින් අපිට දුක කනගාටුව මේ කුණු වෙච්ච බිත්තරයක් අරගෙන කිකිලියට ගහනවා නම් මේ ඔක්කොම බිත්තර සෞතුයි කියලා හරි ප්‍රශ්නයක්. අපේ විදේශීය වෙදකම ඉතා විශාල ඒ නිසා එක එක සිද්ධි අහුලන්න එපා.
We are disappointed to say that a lot of people have discredited all these medicines because of a few bad ones. Do not focus on just one. We believe the trials will bring forward favorable results.
කියලා අපි හිතන අපේ විශ්වාසයි සාර්ථකයි කියලා.
However, the State Minister of Pharmaceutical Production, Regulation and Supply, Professor Channa Jayasumana, expressed the following views on the medicines which have been developed to counter COVID-19. More than 100 drugs have been presented thus far. We cannot run trials on all of those. We do not possess the necessary facilities for it. Based on Western medical science, one cannot test an indigenous medicine in a hurry.
දැන් අද වෙලා තියෙන්නේ අපි කළ යුතු දේවල් පැත්තක තියලා නොකළ යුතු දේවල් වල පැටලෙනවා.
What has happened today? We are not focusing on matters that should be given priority. Ideally, we should expedite the process of bringing the vaccine to Sri Lanka and distribute it to the general public. It is good if we have an indigenous tonic. It is even better if this tonic can cure the virus. However, if such a tonic is being distributed, it must be tested first. Following the tests and confirmation on its effectiveness, a decision should be reached to distribute the tonic. Take it from someone who has held the position of President of the World Health Assembly. What will happen if this tonic is not effective? The distribution process should take place after scientific confirmation.
ඒ නිසා ඒ පිළිබඳව පරීක්ෂණ පවත්වලා තහවුරු කරගෙන තමයි ඒ ලබා දිය යුත්තේ.
The World Health Organization has pledged to provide 20% of Sri Lanka's population with the COVID-19 vaccine. Apart from this, what measures has the government taken to address this issue? The government has not allocated any funds to facilitate the procurement or distribution of the vaccine. They have not placed orders for the vaccine. Instead of implementing a centralized effort to curb the virus, they are focusing on matters that are not important. On the other hand, our country is facing a huge economic crisis. People are deprived from going to work because of the virus, and if they don't report to work, they will lose their jobs. Against such a backdrop, the government is trying to cover up their weaknesses by diverting our attention towards magicians and mental patients. During the first COVID-19 wave, there were many medical specialists who informed the public about the pandemic, but most of them have either been transferred to another ministry or have been forced to retire or been silenced.
Former Director General of Health Services and the current Secretary to the Ministry of Environment, Dr. Anil Jasinghe, who contributed immensely to curb the first wave of COVID-19 in Sri Lanka, participated in a tree planting program in Hambantota today.
This program aims to plant 5 million trees within the next 5 years. This is the first time provisions have been allocated by the ministry for such an initiative. The environment is destroyed due to development activities, and this is why it is important to focus on sustainable development. There is a clash between sustainable development and environmental sustainability. We must strike a balance between these two.
ලෝකේ පුරා සිද්ධ වෙනවා. අපිට අවශ්‍ය වෙන්නේ මෙන්න මේ ගැටුම අඩු කර ගැනීම.
The former Director General of Health Services expressed these views during the Husma Denaturu National Tree Planting Program held in Suryawara today. The event took place under the auspices of the Minister of Environment, Mahinda Amaravira.
Meanwhile, convening a media briefing today, Venerable Omalpe Sobitatero expressed his views on the measures taken by the government in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic.
The government has unveiled plans of obtaining a 10 billion loan from the World Bank to purchase the COVID-19 vaccine. It is against such a backdrop that proposals are being put forward to hold the provincial council elections, which will cost another 5 to 6 billion rupees. Does Sri Lanka have sufficient assets to fund another election? Can our country afford this election? This is not what the people want. Provincial councils have not been operating for 3 years. The country was not affected by this. Only the selfish politicians who aim at benefiting from the system have been affected.
මේ පිළිබඳව අදහස් පරමාර්ථ අභිප්‍රාය ඇති කරගෙන තියෙන්නේ.
Main sponsor.
Waste containers imported to Sri Lanka have been discovered by the customs. These waste containers have been imported from Ukraine by 8 Sri Lankan consignees.
The consignment was exported to Sri Lanka from Agranica Trade LLC in Ukraine, and initially 8 containers had arrived in Sri Lanka on the 10th of December, while another 20 containers arrived on the 21st of December. According to a statement from Sri Lanka Customs, the cargo declared to Customs as whole coriander seeds imported from Ukraine was revealed to contain 8 consignments of agricultural plant waste following initial investigation. The value of these containers are approximately 75.6 million rupees, disregarding custom duties. 4 waste containers were inspected this evening.
නවභාර පත්‍රිකාවල ඒවා සම්බන්ධ ලියකියවිලිවල ඒ වගේම රේගුවට ඉදිරිපත් කළ ප්‍රකාශවල පොත්තමල්ලි ලෙස තමයි සඳහන් කරලා තිබුණේ.
The cargo was declared to customs as whole coriander seeds. However, following investigations, it was revealed to be agriculture plant waste. Investigations are currently underway to determine whether the importers were misled and fell victim to fraud. As per the environment and customs law in the country, we cannot import and hold such waste containers. Upon the instructions of the chairman of the customs department, we will take action to re-export them.
තාමත් ඉක්මනින් ක්‍රියාමාර්ග ගන්නවා පිට ආපහු මේ බහලුම් 28 යුක්‍රේනය බලා හරවය වීමට.
Ukraine කියන්නේ යුරෝපයට ආශ්‍රිත රට. Ukraine is an European country. Sri Lanka is an Asian country. The climate and weather in both countries are completely different. We suspect that these waste containers may include chemical substances that would have an adverse effect on our ecological system. Therefore, we cannot allow waste of any kind to be imported into the country.
The Sri Lanka Customs said currently 24 containers are lying inside the Colombo port, and the remaining 4 containers seized by customs officials are inside the examination yard of Sri Lanka Customs.
Meanwhile, convening a media briefing, the Surakimu Sri Lanka National Organization expressed its views about the waste consignments that were imported to the country recently.
පහුගිය කාලේ සායනික අපද්‍රව්‍ය කන්ටේනර් ගාණාවක් ආවා. ඒක 208ක්.
More than 200 waste consignments were imported to the country last year. We took the matters to court and upon the court's verdict were re-exported back to the United Kingdom. Sri Lanka is not a junkyard to dispose garbage belonging to other countries. Several large-scale business tycoons are involved in this. According to the Basel Convention, a country is not allowed to dispose of its garbage in another country. However, several factions have disregarded this and have imported waste to Sri Lanka in the guise of importing coriander seeds or essential items. The government has failed to identify those responsible for importing such waste or the companies behind this, or whether any customs officials are supporting such fraud. If the factions who were responsible for importing the medical waste several months ago were punished, this would not repeat. Our country has become a garbage dump.
Chairman of the Sri Lanka Ports Authority, retired General Daya Ratnayaka, said that the development work of the Kankasanture port will commence early next year. He said that they expect to complete the work in around 2 years' time.
The Kankasanture port, which spreads over an area of 50 acres, was built in the 70s. The port, which comprises of a 1,400-meter breakwater, was widely used in the past for transporting cement to Colombo from Galle. With the effect of the war, the port of Kankasanture was greatly damaged. The Kankasanture port is to be restored using the funds received from the $45 million loan which were obtained from the Exim Bank of India. The loan is to be repaid within a period of 20 years' time. The chairman of the Ports Authority told Newsfirst that as its first phase, they are expecting to restore the breakwater of the Kankasanture port.
Sri Lanka Waraya Adhikari Arate.
Our main hope is to develop the existing Kankasanture port, which is under the Sri Lanka Ports Authority in collaboration with the government of India. We hope to restore the breakwater and to build a terminal to dock large vessels, and we hope to bring cement from Colombo to here by road, and we hope to bring fertilizer. Most of the fertilizer is used in the north and east areas, so by bringing the fertilizer through the waters, we can reduce the price of fertilizer.
Final plans to develop the Kankasanture port, which is currently inoperational through an Indian loan, have been drawn up against the backdrop where the Palali airport is currently under development based on an agreement reached with India. In July 2019, the government of Sri Lanka completed the first phase of development work worth 226 million rupees, and India agreed to provide 3 billion rupees to complete the second phase of the Palali airport. It is against this backdrop that the East Container Terminal of the Colombo port is being prepared to be handed over to the Indian Adani Group. The investment is already being studied by 2 committees.
A cabinet paper has been tabled in this regard, and it does not state in this paper to give this terminal to the Adani Group. It only states to provide a report to bring an investor to this project, and the committees are appointed for this purpose. We are waiting for this committee report, and we don't think that they will make any decision prior to this report. Our message to the country is clear. We will not let anyone take this away from us, and we will do our best to ensure it doesn't happen.
400 meters of the East Jetty has already been constructed by the Ports Authority. It will be the one and only terminal in the world with 2 jetties in 15 and 18 meter lengths. By this, we can save a large sum of money.
Many containers that are imported to the port are re-exported to India. We need to decide whether we are going to collaborate with India and gain more benefit from this. The experts in this area will examine the situation before making the decision, and we will inform the final decision to the public once it is made.
We are
in a fierce struggle with the government against handing over the East Terminal to India. We had a lengthy discussion with the President and informed him not to do it. This is a national treasure and we should keep it for our future generations. During the tenure of Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, a memorandum of understanding was reached in this regard, and this went beyond an agreement. The agreement was to create 2 companies between Sri Lanka and India and to allow Sri Lanka to hold the ownership of the land. This was explained to us by the President. If this government implements this because it has been agreed before, we will stand against it. It cannot be justified by any means. We are ready to gather people to fight against it.
Shifting our attention to neighbouring India now, what is the current situation of the protests being staged in India? Charlene Benedict joins us from the newsroom.
Thank you very much, Jayamal. Of course, the farmers' protests in India continued against the new farming laws that have been introduced in the country that the farmers allege allow large corporations like the Adani Group to exploit them. Now, the magnitude of these protests can be understood by the fact that over 40 farmers have already died in India during these protests. These protests are seen as one of the largest in one of the biggest democracies in the world in the recent decades. However, Indian media reported that the government is conducting discussions with the farmers regarding these new laws.
The Indian government has written to agitating farmers, asking them to decide the date and time for the next round of talks. With protests continuing against new farming laws in India, the Indian government has repeatedly said that the change would actually benefit farmers. According to the World Bank, more than 40% of India's workforce is engaged in agriculture. There are no official figures for rural household income in recent years, but there is data on agricultural wage which shows the rate of growth slowing down between 2014 and 2019. Congress leader including Rahul Gandhi met with the Indian president to submit a memorandum containing 20 million signatures seeking his intervention in the farm laws issue. Supporting the protesting parties, Indian opposition parties have urged the government to convene a joint session of the parliament and repeal the laws. In those private member bills, farmers' leaders have pointed out how market can be run by trader cartels looting primary producers right under the nose of the government. They predict that the bills will lead to monopoly of trader cartels while purchasing from farmers.
We now cross over for a short commercial break.
Legends 966 this season. A collection of the most memorable songs, Christmas hits and family favorites 24/7. Tune in now.
Struggling to find reliable plumbers, electricians, gardeners and other service providers? Bellboys got you covered.
The JVP claims that the present government has failed to manage the price of essential goods.
Since the present government came into power, the price of essential goods have skyrocketed. Back in November last year, a kilo of samba was 95 rupees. But today, a kilo of nadu is 132 rupees. A kilo of Bombay onions, which were 147 rupees last year, is now 160 rupees. A kilo of dried chilies was 490 rupees. But today, it is 550 rupees, an increase of 70 rupees. A coconut was 58 rupees back then. Today, it is more than 100 rupees. A kilo of dal was 110 rupees. Today, a kilo of dal is 180 rupees. A bottle of coconut oil, which was 320 rupees, now costs 480 rupees. A kilo of sugar, which was 100 rupees last year, is now 125 rupees. A kilo of sprats, which was 625 rupees, but now it is more than 850 rupees. These are the results that have been achieved during the year. Prices of essential food items have skyrocketed and people are suffering to make ends meet. These prices are based on central bank data. The prices of these goods are much higher in the local market. The government has failed to manage the price of essential goods.
මහබැංකුවේම වාර්තාවලට අනුව මම මේ සංඛ්‍යා ලේඛන කිව්වේ. සාමාන්‍ය වෙළඳපොලේ මීටත් වඩා මිල වැඩි අත්‍යවශ්‍ය භාණ්ඩ මිල පාලනය කරගන්න අද ආණ්ඩුව අසමත් වෙලා තියෙනවා.
Headline inflation, as measured by the National Consumer Price Index, decreased to 5.2% in November 2020 from 5.5% in October this year. According to the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, food inflation decreased to 9.4% in November 2020 from 10.6% in the previous month, whereas non-food inflation increased to 1.7% in November from 1.5% in October this year. Meanwhile, the Sri Lankan rupee depreciated to 194.6 rupees against the US dollar today. The Central Bank of Sri Lanka is of the view that, quote, the recent increase in volatility of the exchange rate is unwarranted and unacceptable, end quote. In a statement this evening, the CBSL said it will take appropriate action aggressively hereafter to contain this volatility in the domestic foreign exchange market. Together with the continuation of the curtailment of non-essential imports, the central bank expects the rupee to appreciate within the next few days towards the levels of below 185 rupees per US dollar observed in November of 2020. The central bank said discussions with domestic and foreign counterparts to boost the level of reserves are also reaching an advanced stage of conclusion, and the receipt of these expected inflows will facilitate exchange rate stability and further support the government to meet its debt obligations. The opposition has continuously alleged that the cost of living has increased and the public is suffering to make ends meet. As the Minister of Trade, I have only one thing to say to the general public. Our country is facing a crisis that has never been experienced before. Due to COVID-19, we import potatoes, chickpeas, green peas and various food items to the country. Due to extraordinary circumstances, the process of transporting and distributing these goods to the public might delay. For instance, an employee of the port involved in the process of unloading these items might have tested positive for the virus. Due to delays in the logistics system, the food that comes in might have got spoiled. Ultimately, this would lead to a shortage of food items in the local market. This shortage will lead to a price increase. These factors contributing to the increase in prices is beyond the control of the government.
On to some tragic news. More than 24 birds have been reported dead in Eluankulama in the Puttlam district.
The local wildlife officer believes the birds could have eaten a poisonous substance which resulted in the mass death of birds. Authorities have launched an investigation into the incident.
Christmas is just hours away, and so is our beloved Santa Claus. But how will things change for Santa in the new normal? We leave you tonight with the World Health Organization's message to the entire world in light of Christmas. For the Newsfirst team, I'm Zayama Ratnaik, along with our sign language interpreter for tonight, Brian De Cruz. Take care, stay safe, and have yourself a Merry Christmas.
I can tell you that Santa Claus is immune to this virus. We had a brief chat with him and he is doing very well. Mrs. Claus is doing very well, and they're very busy right now. And we have heard from a number of leaders across the world who have told us that they have relaxed the quarantine measures for Santa to enter the airspace. So he will be able to travel in and out of the airspace and be able to deliver presents to children. But I think it is very important that all children of the world understand that physical distancing by Santa Claus and also of the children themselves must be strictly enforced. So it is really important that the children of the world, still listen to their moms and dads and their guardians and make sure that they go to bed early on Christmas Eve. But Santa will be able to travel around the world to deliver presents.